Okay, I want you to picture this. It's Rome, July 64 AD. The night sky over the biggest city in the world is glowing this terrifying, unnatural red. It's not the sunset, it's an inferno. The eternal city is literally on fire.
And right in the middle of all that chaos, we get one of history's most famous and, frankly, damning images. The Emperor Nero, not fighting the flames, not leading his people, but supposedly up in a tower with his lyre, putting on a show as his city burns to the ground. It's a picture of detachment so complete, it's haunted his name for 2,000 years.
But here's the thing. Is that what really happened? Is that the whole picture? Today, we're going to dive into this incredibly complicated guy and try to find the real person behind the legend. So who was this guy? Was he a bloodthirsty monster, a creative soul who was just completely misunderstood? Or was he basically a spoiled kid who got handed the keys to the world's most powerful empire? That's what we're here to figure out. First up, let's talk about that infamous fire. Don't worry, we are absolutely getting back to that legendary blaze. But to really get what went down, we gotta rewind. Because here's the crazy part. Nero's time as emperor didn't start with disaster at all. Actually, it started with a ton of promise. People were even calling it a golden age. Get this, he was only 16 years old when he took the throne. And for the first 5 years, things were great. So great, in fact, that this period got its own name, the Quinquennium Neronis. It was held up as a model of good government. It really seemed like Rome was in for something special. And just look at what he did. He cut taxes, he banned capital punishment, he put a stop to secret trials, he even passed a law that allowed slaves to sue masters who treated them unfairly. I mean, wow! With his top advisors Seneca and Burrus guiding him, he looked like a genuinely good ruler. For a little while, people thought, hey, maybe this is it. Maybe we finally have our philosopher king. But, of course there's a but. Beneath all that good government, a really, really toxic power struggle was brewing. And it was all about his mother, the very woman who schemed to put him on the throne in the first place. His mom, Agrippina, she was an absolute force to be reckoned with. Super smart, super ambitious, and a total control freak. We're talking about a woman who had her own face put on coins right next to his, who would literally hide behind a curtain to listen in on Senate meetings. So you can imagine Nero started feeling suffocated. She wasn't an advisor anymore, she was this shadow he just had to get out from under. And this whole power struggle leads to one of the most shocking moments in Roman history. Nero decides to kill his own mother. His first plan is just bonkers. He builds this special collapsible boat to make her drowning look like an accident, but it fails. Agrippina was a good swimmer and just swam back to shore. So with that theatrical plot totally busted, Nero went for the direct approach. He sent in assassins. And you can just feel the horror of that moment in what are said to be her last words. The story goes that when the assassins showed up, she looked them in the eye and defiantly told them, "This right here, this was the point of no return. With his mother gone, any kind of moral compass he might have had just shattered. This is where the paranoid, tyrannical Nero we all hear about is truly born. Yeah, the golden age, it was officially over." And that brings us right back to where we started, Rome in ashes. But the man in charge now is a very, very different Nero. So let's talk about the fire itself. For 9 days, think about that. For 9 straight days, this massive fire just ripped through the city. The chaos must have been unbelievable. By the time it was over, huge chunks of Rome were just gone. The scale of it all is hard to even wrap your head around. So the million-dollar question, did he actually fiddle while Rome burned? Well, probably not. Our best historical source, a guy named Tacitus, says Nero wasn't even in Rome when the fire broke out. He was about 50 miles away and actually rushed back to lead relief efforts, opening up his own palaces for people who lost their homes and bringing in food. But the rumors just wouldn't die. The public was angry and they needed someone to blame. So Nero found a scapegoat, the Christians. They were a small and pretty misunderstood group at the time, and he persecuted them in these really brutal public ways. And then, and this is a big one, he took a huge piece of the land that had been cleared by the fire and started building himself a gigantic, over-the-top palace, the Golden House. For a lot of Romans, that looked really, really suspicious.
And this obsession with his own artistic genius, well, that's what would eventually bring him down. You see, Nero didn't just want to be an emperor. He wanted to be a star. He was all about performing in public, singing, playing instruments, even racing chariots. But for the Roman elite, this was a total disgrace. In their minds, an emperor was supposed to be a serious general, a dignified leader, not an entertainer. They thought he was making a complete fool of himself.
By 68 AD, everyone had had enough. The outer provinces started to rebel, and then everything just collapsed, and it happened so fast. The army turned against him, his own bodyguards ditched him, and finally the Senate officially declared him an enemy of the people. So there he was, totally alone, hiding out in a villa, and in the end, he couldn't even bring himself to do the deed. He had to get his secretary to help him. And his last words, they are just so perfectly, tragically Nero. So, what's the final verdict on Nero? How do we even begin to understand a guy like this? Well, this is where it gets really interesting, because for the Roman Senate, for the historians writing everything down, he was an absolute tyrant, a monster. But the regular people of Rome, a lot of them actually loved him. They loved the entertainment, the handouts, the big public projects. For years after he died, people were still putting flowers on his tomb. How about that? But his legacy, man, it's huge. He basically became the blueprint for the evil artist tyrant. He's infamous as the first emperor to really go after the Christians, even getting called the Antichrist. And his death was a massive deal. It ended the entire dynasty started by Augustus and kicked off a year of absolutely brutal civil war. In the end, Nero's story leaves us with this big, kind of scary question, doesn't it? What happens when you give someone with a really fragile ego absolute power? He wanted to be loved as an artist, but instead of earning it, his power let him just demand it. And his whole life is this dark, fascinating warning about what can happen when the state becomes a stage for just one person's ego.